You guys are live. Thank you.
Okay, good morning. Welcome to the July 17th meeting of the Benton County Commissioners. We will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, do we have any public comment this morning? Seeing none, we'll go to commission comments. Commissioner McKenna.
That's okay. After last Thursday's meeting, I met with Amanda to go over a catch-22 situation the resident of Lakeside had with, and was that he was caught in, and she had a solution of contact him. He's going to contact her and get it cleared up. The afternoon, then I participated in my first fence viewing meeting. It's a very unusual part of a commissioner's job. Didn't even know it was there. There was such a thing. Friday, I attended a meeting, go over the Chamber of Commerce study on possible event centers and relating it to the fairgrounds. The study needs to be revised with information because it was done before K-State talked about their new facility they're doing. So they're going to see if they can get that revised and updated. There were a lot of comments relating to the rodeo and fairgrounds locations, and a few people seem to think that county had a pot of money just waiting to spend on these facilities. They can say, well, can't the county pay for those? With what? Saturday, I attended a class to learn how to turn a bowl on a lathe. It was Father's Day gift for my kids. It was a fun, informative class, and it took all day for me to make one cereal bowl size project. But it was fun. I learned a lot. It was really good.
Probably a good hobby to have.
Yeah, it was really fun. That was it.
Okay. Commissioner Foley?
But I learned how to eat a lot of cereal out of that bowl to make it worth the while.
Yeah, I'm not gonna put.
At least you have to make sure it
Not gonna
leaks.
put any milk
At
in it.
least.
It's more of a candy dish.
You do need to bring it in. See.
Yeah.
Love to
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah,
Love to see it.
absolutely.
What kind of wood do you use?
It was poplar.
Okay,
It's good for that.
okay.
Well, for me, see, Thursday afternoon, I didn't put in my notes. I kind of forgot about it, the fence viewing.
Oh, how can
Sounds
you
like-
forget that?
Well, it's probably because we've got what, 3 or 4 more coming down the pike. So,
Couple.
yeah, so we'll just have to take that in stride. It was rather hot outside too. So I didn't realize how maybe a little dehydrated I was when I got back, but I was in a rush too. So it's late work sometimes. Thursday afternoon, after all that, I did sit down later in the afternoon and I went back through K-State's Research and Extension's July e-call. It's called Downtown Rural Revitalization, kind of goes along with some of the stuff we talked about on our revitalization conferences and stuff. Presentation 1 was from Luke Mahan, the former Republic County Economic Development Director, and Kelly Gorley, who's the Lincoln County Economic Development Foundation. She owns a really cool fitness center that's kind of incorporated into all this. So they both went through the creative and innovative processes to redevelop historic structures, buildings, respective downtown areas, and trying to use resources that are available, obviously, from both the state level and other areas to try to accomplish that. So Friday morning, I met with Mike Matson from the chamber at Early Edition to discuss some questions in regard to the LABTR. As you may recall, he was communications director for then Governor Bill Graves. So I thought maybe he might have some insight as to why that disappeared. What was the discussion on that? It didn't come from the governor's office at the time. It was, imagine that, fully legislative, but thought maybe he had some insight on that, but really didn't. But we kind of talked through the timeline on it, and as we try to work on that particular issue moving forward. And I know you probably received the letter from KAC and or from Clancy on that. Trying to make sure that we have the right community partners in place to put that information together, I think is also paramount. So spent some time discussing that, and some other related property tax concerns that I had. Wanted to see where he think maybe the chamber might fall on that moving forward. So we'll probably have to revisit several of those conversations, but at least we broke the ice. Also Friday afternoon, I met with Robin Cole, Executive Director of Pawnee Mental Health. Hadn't had a chance to catch up with her in quite some time due to both of us being really, really busy, but wanted to get a more in-depth analysis to the move that they've made to CCHBC, which took place officially on July 1st. Was curious to see what the short term and maybe the more longer term impact will be for her and the agency. They have to quite considerably increase services, which means they have to put personnel in place. That could be anywhere from 80 to 100 people total before it's all said and done. So obviously that's one challenge. The other challenge is, where do you put all of those people? So I was kind of curious to see what their plan and what they're trying to do with that. They're working on trying to find some places to lease in the short term with a longer term strategy at some particular point in time. I do think they have a pretty good plan incorporated. Really, they kind of got to get to probably the fall, September, October, to really see how that changeover comes and how they can rebuild for some of those things and obviously pay for them, but they're on the right track. So that's good to know for sure. Saturday morning, I joined the Riley County Republicans at their monthly coffee talk over at Dobro's on the west side of town. Barry Wilkerson, county attorney, gave a presentation on American exceptionalism and all he and his staff do at the office for the county, and kind of how they prosecute cases and what some of those cases and what some of those things are looking like. Certainly not a happy ray of sunshine, to say the least. I also gave an update on what we're working on here, including the 2024 budget. Answered some questions, was able to get caught up on several events and things they're working on. There is going to be a candidates forum on October 5th out at Potchoff Hall. I believe it's going to be both for the school board and city commission, a municipal race. I don't know all the details of it yet. I think they're still trying to put all that together. Last, I wanted to make everyone aware that I have earned an appointment to NACO's Veteran and Military Services Committee. Technically started immediately. Their annual conferences this weekend in Austin. As I've mentioned, I don't really want to go down and hang out in Longhorn country. So I'm going to make that this year, but next year's work, much like the other committee that I'm on, will start in September. So this does allow me to have some input issues and challenges that affect Fort Riley and some of our local military issues on the federal level, and be able to put in some input and take some input back. So as I said, that committee work starts in September. Also, I don't know how many of you read the update that we get from our commission lobbyist, Mike Taylor. Usually puts together some interesting stuff. Sometimes it's just status quo, sometimes it's not, but most of this update was on elections. And I'd say you really probably need to look at that. Rich is fully aware, but the audit of the county elections has drawn quite a bit of conversation here lately, and need to remind ourselves that of those 15 counties, Riley County was part of that. So we don't have any challenges here, but there are some challenges in a couple of counties, Chase and Ford County, to be honest. And there's all kinds of ideas. Is that a good word, you think? Ideas? I could use another couple adjectives, but I'm trying to keep it
All of
E.
it's
PG.
ideas, because everything they're writing people up on isn't state law or
Yeah.
policy and procedure.
There's some who thinks that we need to get rid of the voting machines and all of those things and go back to paper ballots, which I don't know how you at the state level supersede federal election requirements, but that's out of my hands, I guess. So there's all kinds of new things being talked about there, and how to examine those, splitting up those practices. Rich has mentioned one of those about oversight on securities and having more than one person have to go through those processes. I am of the opinion at some point in time, collectively, there's a state association or separate organizations are gonna have to start taking some needed stances on some of this. So Apparently the ACLU gave them some kind of a report on that too, and how much county officials play and voter turnouts across the state. So as we get into 2024, you can just expect that that's going to be a big issue. So I just mentioned that because I think we just need to be prepared, and I do think we've kind of, at least on the outset, prepared ourselves somewhat with everything we're trying to put in place for the budget to handle that next year, but it's not going to be fun. So lastly, glad we got some rain on Friday. Wish we would have got some more yesterday. I think I had a little over an inch and a half Friday at mine. Yeah, just enough to make it humid and make the grass grow and stuff again, but take it this time of year. And NFL training camp start this week. For me anyway, that's kind of the first small little hint of fall, even though I know we probably got 3 different summers still yet to come in the midst of all that, but football.
That's the 3-on-3 starting record. The 3-on-3 tournament.
It's Thursday.
In Wichita, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay. You going?
No,
It'd be
I've
fun.
been tempted.
It'd be fun.
Did see that they brought on Rodney Magruder as a co-manager
No.
last night over the weekend, something.
Yeah, he's still got contracts.
Yeah. So, yeah, that should be fun. I'm hopeful that maybe we can finally make it past the second round, maybe. Seems to get caught up in that second game, so do wish them the best of luck. So, and that's all I've got this morning.
Okay, well, I'm gonna keep it short. Thursday afternoon, we went, along with Rich Argo and Clancy Holman, we went and met property owners for the fence viewing, which I had never even thought was in our purview. But it was interesting. We went up on a ranch property north of Randolph, spent approximately 2 hours looking at the property's fences, water, and hearing from the disputing property owners. It was really interesting to hear both sides of it and kind of ask a couple questions and not get a whole lot of answers, but no decision was made in the afternoon by the commissioners, and it was really hot. So went home and I was just really tired, so I just stayed cool for a while that evening. Friday morning, I tried to reach some Sheets area landowners, left several more messages, kind of at a standstill right now, except that we've got the one property owner that's gonna let us come up and take a look. I was waiting for Brian Foster to get back, he should be back in his office today, so I'll set up something hopefully this week. Let's see if it's a possibility. Because it's very frustrating right now. So that afternoon, I was down here in the office doing some work for my paperwork, following up on phone calls, looking at the 2024 budget, emails, today's meeting documents. As I was here, the cloud, it got really dark in my office. I'm like, uh-oh, what's going on? So I said, okay, I better go home and make sure everything's secure. So, but we got my area, we got about probably close to 2 inches. It was really
0.70.
I got half.
yeah.
What about a little over an inch and a half?
I know. I was hoping I'd have gotten it.
Apparently,
But I'm glad for what I got.
It was a good day. The next day to pull weeds. So,
We've
lots
had
of
enough
weeds.
rain, I can kind of sit there and watch my corn grow out in the fields. It was
Yeah.
amazing how fast corn grows.
Oh, yeah.
I know, some of the fields just.
they did have apparently a small little tornado or something over in Lawrence, just kind of
Oh, really? I hadn't heard that.
right around
Big,
campus.
floods, all sorts of.
Yeah, they had high winds too. It's good.
So, and Friday evening, I joined some friends for a birthday dinner, which was the day before my birthday, and we went to a local restaurant and had a really good time. Saturday, went to a movie, just kind of relaxed and enjoyed myself and look forward to another year. Anyway, that's it for me.
You ready for business,
Yes.
commissioners? First item you have is tax roll.
Anybody have any questions?
Go ahead and make a motion to accept the tax roll correction.
I'll second.
So moved and seconded to approve the tax roll correction. All in favor? Aye.
Chair, please sign. Thank you. Next, Commissioners, if I could get a motion to sign the thank you letter to the city of Riley and Leonardville for the use of their facilities for the Riley County Commission meetings.
Go ahead and make a motion to sign thank you letters to the city of Riley and the city of Leonardville for use of their facility for Riley County commission meetings.
I'll second.
So moved and seconded to sign the thank you letters to Rowley and Leonardville. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All three sign, please. Great, you can give us an update on the facility. How's it going?
The got garage doors in, so it's closed in now.
Nice.
And lock it up.
But that changed it.
Yeah, I did. And the shingles are all stacked on the roof,
Good.
delivered, and they putting up some corner trim for the siding.
Mhm.
to get ready. And the siding's actually got it stacked back there too.
Good.
So it
That'll go for it.
could go. I've got a good change dramatically this week.
Yeah, for
Everybody
sure.
gets their
Now,
Thinking I could remember, what did we choose for siding on that again?
steel siding.
That's what I thought, okay. Looks the part, man, that's for sure.
Pretty exciting.
it is. Going fast now.
Well, it slows down. We need to finish this.
Yeah. I said, soon, maybe you'll have center some pictures.
Good. I know she appreciates that.
We know the people are very, really excited.
Yeah.
Get your professional camera here pretty soon.
You have a good. I
You do, it's on the phone.
I do, okay.
I've got a 35 millimeter. It's really good. Zoom lenses and all that stuff.
Sometimes I've been up there just for phone, but I was trying to get there. Like they were, they, you out there with huge, a big pile of dirt on the corner, they can get up there and get it.
Oh, yeah.
It's good vantage point.
Yeah,
It's not really wet.
it's very steep. Pile, but
Yeah.
so far I haven't rolled down the side.
See workers' comp.
Yeah.
See.
Oh, boy.
Going down to that watering hole the other day, it was a little steep, got a little treacherous. I tried to trying to get him.
Like it's steep and it's, of course, the grass is this.
Yeah, you can't see
A little bit of wet. It's kind of,
Makes it slick.
yeah.
Next, Commissioner, the Riley County Employee Action Form for Heather Bigwood, a new hire as needed museum assistant, museum department. All three sign, please. Commissioners have any changes to the minutes?
No.
I didn't see him.
Say anything and jump out at me either. Okay, like a motion that we approve the minutes as written from the whatever that was. That the 14th, the 13th, July 13th meeting of the Riley County Commission.
I'll second.
So moved and seconded to accept the minutes as written from the July 13th meeting. All in favor?
Aye. Tentative agenda is okay, Commissioners.
When are we having the discussion on flexible scheduling on 410s?
I think it was scheduled for the end of July.
27th is what she had
I
said.
think on staff availability is. Been the big hurdle this time of year, everyone's on vacations and so. Before that, of course, she will be getting the commissioners all the detailed responses,
Yes.
but she's just gonna, for the presentation, a summary.
Yeah.
So, but you guys will see all responses as commissioners. Any items for next week's press conference, commissioners? Okay, next time up, year-to-date budget expenditure reports, 2024 budget development worksheet. And if favorable by the board, the indication of the revenue neutral rate for county and the fire district. 9 o'clock.
And when are we gonna do the fence viewing?
Discussion.
The next one,
Decision, no, a decision on that.
probably a car next week, I'm thinking. And the beginning of a decision by the board. So.
I've got some
Thank you, ladies.
questions on it.
Yeah, I do too. I do too.
Yeah, so I
And
can't bring them up now, but yes.
You
I
know, I
got you.
really don't. I'm not getting it very easily
Yeah.
there either, to be honest with you.
that's perfectly well, and you're perfectly well entitled to have questions and have them answered. So that's okay. I'm going to bring it in, not with necessarily view towards that car, will be where we are. Here are some issues that you can decide. There may be some issues you can't decide. And if you need more information, then we'll get it.
Sounds like to me, whatever we decide, that's not where it's gonna end. That's what it sounds like to me. But that's the nature.
That is often the case.
That's what I figured, yeah.
Well, because even once you enter a decision, if it's within those things that the board is entitled to decide, and you can't decide every single dispute that every landowner has with another landowner. I'll just say broadly, I'm not talking about this one. You can get called back to see whether or not your order has been complied with. Once that order is filed with the Register of Deeds, it can still come up. Congratulations.
Yeah,
See why we don't tell people who are going to run
Yeah,
for
that's-
county commission that this is.
Yeah, I had no idea.
no, actually, I was actually informed of that one.
I heard of that.
But you know, I made it to lucky you're number 5 before.
But we try and conceal it from you.
How far back in the statutes does that go? Like back into the 1800s?
I saw one
Yeah,
that
it's
goes back to
1900.
1868.
It's 19th, the bulk of them are 19th century.
Yeah.
That's why they're written the way they are. They've been tweaked a little bit over the years. But not a lot.
I had a great uncle that was in one of the early legislatures. And that's what they, the write-ups that I saw, that's what they did a lot, settle fence disputes.
You figured that probably from a historic perspective makes sense because, during development of statehood and then, when it becomes a state, then you got to put homestead acts and you got to try to break all that up. And it would have been right in that same amount of time.
Yeah, it's no accident that that's where they come.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
It's rather archaic.
I'd like to see how many of those kind of come into play back in the Great Depression era too, in the 30s and
There's a
40s.
separate process for soil viewing. Because a prior commission had to do one of those. It was a dust view. And that
That's
does
true.
come
Oh,
from,
what?
that comes from the Dust Bowl days.
What, if somebody's kicking up too much?
Well, if their method of agriculture, and this is the way it usually comes up, they're doing their crop work in a way that is, according to the adjoining landowner, eroding their soil or dumping soil on them.
Or on that case was, the dust was making the calves sick, so one was at a crop farmer, the one on the other side of the road was raising cattle, and it was causing, claim was causing illness to the calves.
Wow.
We had extension was involved in that one because there needed to be measurements made of the soil and
please tell me there's not a such thing as error viewing.
way to go.
Well.
If only hopefully no member of the legislature is watching.
Yeah, well, they claimed it was road because it was really dry and it was a dusty road,
Yeah.
That one took a while.
I've had arguments on the dust issue with others in the past and you're living out in the rural setting, you're not gonna get away from that. If you have respiratory and other type of issues, you need to take that into consideration. Yeah, that's not an expense to be bared by all because you chose it.
And I believe part of the background on that soil abuse stuff, that process also was some kind of, I don't know if it was an amendment to those, that particularly statutory setup, but there was a legislator that died on the way back from a legislative session. And it was linked, the death was related, the accident was related to dust
That
blowing
wasn't too
across.
long ago.
It
Oh,
had something
yeah.
to do with that.
That wasn't too long ago.
That
That
had
was
some kind of impact.
2012 or 2013.
Wasn't it you can't see on the road? and-
Well, there was something, and I don't remember exactly. I'm just
Well,
testing my
they-
memory, but I know.
That was after Sindine, and they gavelled out at like 2:30 something in the morning. He went ahead and traveled home. And so it was dark and dusty at the same time.
Yeah, and I could be remembering it wrong, that it generated some change. It could be that it just got back in kind of the public view that was out there as an issue. Couldn't tell you, I have to go back and look, but yeah, no, there is not an air view, right? Nor should there be. That's more in the lines of people in the back seat saying so-and-so's breathing my air. My little sister's breathing.
In this day and age, I wouldn't necessarily write it off though either.
There's chemicals in the air and they're getting into my car.
David,
Morning.
And some of those old chemicals really still are.
John?
Good morning.
You know, John, you really don't have to come to these budget work sessions, so.
Yes, I
do. I
don't trust you.
Yeah, and I wouldn't watch the live stream either. I would just wait and see what happens.
I wouldn't really worry about it until January 1st.
We'll tell you then. but
Yeah, you'll know at that point.
Actually, that did kind of happen this year.
Say I lost my pen.
There you are.
No, I took it up there.
Oh.
Yes.
Blocking Brittany's number.
Not yet, but it's close.
I'm not touching it, if that helps.
It does, thank you very much.
John, she's a lot nicer than me.
True.
True.
Not that hard to do.
Did you see me disagreeing with you?
I think they were talking to you.
I got ears. I do have selective hearing, but they do work.
Okay, Rich.
If it's okay with the board, I'd like to go to the most important topic before us, which is the budget development worksheet and the proposed indication of the revenue neutral rate sheets first, and then if we have time for the others, we'll go through them, but if we don't get to those, then the board review them, and if you have questions, just email us, clarify. Is that okay with the board?
Yeah.
Okay, now I want to clarify some questions the board had at the last budget development meeting, because I always like to clarify those when we're talking regarding public works. That appropriation had their staff was not watching it, but they went back and watched it, and so they answered some of our questions. They said they submitted their budgets to KDOC with a merit of 6.5 COLA is the number that was in there. It wasn't the 8%. The question was, well, was it submitted with the 8% and 3% overtime? We can do a line item adjustment at any point if needed. We returned $2,765 on February 28th of 2023 from calendar year 2022 unexpended appropriations to Riley County. We were able to shift training expenditures to our federal BIA grant. We returned $12,867 on June 30th, 2023 from calendar year 23 unexpended appropriations to Riley County. They had a tenured employee take a job with the health department. The position was open for approximately 4 weeks. And the new employees make less than the previous employees. And so I think it was important to report that to the board, because as the appropriation last year and this year, they're showing that they are being very responsible with the funding and just aren't absorbing it into their overall expenditures. They're only using it for personnel. And then if they can find monies elsewhere from the state funds, they're using that first rather than the Riley County money. So I think that's important to relay to the board that we understand that. So clarified that. Any questions on that, commissioners? As you know, commissioners, we had sent you, after we met with the auditor, when I think it was Wednesday and Thursday, a couple times, because they're working on the audit as well as helping us review the budget. I had sent you what is before you, the proposed changes on the budget development worksheet, outlined, you know, what the adjustments were from the previous one. Besides the increase in the beginning balance, there was also one thing I did not put in there. Health department decreased in just their regular personnel, not related to COLA or anything, because they had eliminated a nursing position. So that went down as well. So those factors are all what attributed to the revised budget development worksheet. Oh, and one other thing I have to mention, because you know, John thinks I'm here. Heard what John thinks of me. We input the original presented 200,000 back in the public works budget, and still able to have a proposed, and once again, commissioners, this is all proposed, these are just recommendations we're making to you, at 41.312, which is a 0.899 reduction in the mill levy, just below a 1 mil reduction. Brittany and I had talked about it, and we visited with the auditors, and we thought this was appropriate. If the commissioners want to maintain and take that additional 200,000 back out of public works, we would have to do that. Now, we did put the 200,000 back in, so I thought it was okay to do that, since they were really the only budget that we did that to. But there's, like I say, there's a reason for that. We can do a large sum out of that budget and not impact personnel just because they have the largest amount of 3 seats. So I'm comfortable with what we have proposed to the board, but ultimately, board members, this is your budget. And
See, if we took that 200 out, then we can have a full mill reduction. I'm not proposing, Dan, I just had to share. I had
the same thought. I had the same thought.
He just wanted to see how pale you
were. No, it didn't pale, his head gets red.
Oh, and I'm trying to get back on John's good side. I don't know that that'll ever happen, but you know, I try. So this is what we have proposed for the 2024 budget. As I said, you know, the negative 0.899, you know, with the high valuation increase, you know, I think it's warranted. But we're here to develop the budget how the board sees fit the best. If the board is comfortable with this as proposed, and you will also see in the packet the forms, and these are the forms, the indication of revenue neutral rate, pursuant to KSA 792988 due to the county clerk by this coming Thursday, July 20th. At the proposed that the adopted budget will not exceed the proposed mill levy of 41.312. Date of the hearing we're proposing is August 28, 2023 at 9:15 a.m. And then below that, you also have the indication of revenue neutral rate pursuant to KSA 792988, Riley County Rural Fire District number 1 at 8.914. Hearing date, same date, August 28, 2023 at 9:20 a.m. If the board is favorable of both of those budgets and these timelines, I would need a motion on each one of them individually, please. And proceed from there or stand for questions for the board or to adjust the budget as the board wishes.
Okay.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Now it's budget number 5 for me. This one, some way, shape, or form kind of mirrors 19 more than the 3 in between there, just due to stuff that's happened. But I still struggle with the fact that it's still a pretty large property tax increase across the board for people. And I don't, somebody mentioned the Mercury's article. I don't know if that percentage is right or wrong, but I know it's a percentage, and I know it's rather large, and I know that it's still rather impactful, even though we are reducing things just a bit. But there's surprises in the midst of this for me. I mean, the value of the mill levy just didn't shift in comparison to what evaluations are. I have a feeling there's several different reasons, tax exemptions in general, some other things, but and I really think that as we work out of this COVID fog and some of those challenges and other things, we need to look at the process differently moving in the future. It's too late to do anything drastic this year, but as we start the process in 2025, we need a different focus or different direction.
Yeah, I think that we all want to keep our property taxes as low as possible, but you know, a lot of people don't really, it doesn't really register how much taxes that property we have in this community. The services that we have to provide are expensive. It's just everything's going up in price, and it's a problem, you know, but I don't see much end in sight, except that I think probably with the work of our appraiser, we've got our property values hopefully at a little more even keel, you know, as far as the correct valuations. So maybe we'll see something different in 25.
I think the interesting thing too is there's this notion that things aren't intertwined. So when we start talking about affordable, you know, housing, utilities, services in general, you know, all these things impact that. So as these go up, those are going to go up too. At some point in time, we need to recognize that there's not a difference between that. Either you have to concede one or the other because you can't really have it all. And some point in time, that's got to be part of the dialogue too. So
The outside appropriations too, I would have liked to have funded a little more of the newer groups that are doing work in the community, but it's very difficult at this point.
I think that's the challenge there,
Yeah.
because as all this goes up, everything that they need to provide goes up
Yeah,
and pushes more people off the fence and off that threshold into that.
right.
So we're going to probably hear more and see more on that end, just because, as I said, everything's intertwined.
Fortunately, we have a very, very good, wonderful community that donates a lot of money to these organizations. So hopefully that'll push out some.
But you know, for some people, if they're forced off those thresholds too, they can't do those things
Yeah,
as well.
that's good.
So it's What a vicious circle we find ourselves in. It's a challenge. And yes, there is a demand for what we do and don't provide. I think at some point in time, we need to understand that providing creativity and diversity and innovation within opportunity, just in general, widening our industrial base within reason, providing some other economic development opportunities that will stretch some of that things out and at least balance that out. My opinion is gonna be probably the best and maybe the only option we have. Because we're not gonna fight the cost this year. We're not gonna make things that are unaffordable affordable. We just got to balance it out with opportunity, so at least people have a chance. So we think also moving forward, and I mentioned it earlier, but a fight to get our demand transfers back. I mean, we're not going to fight the unmandated stuff that comes our way. That's just part of it. But if we wanted to, as a state, as local entities, we really want to make a true impact automatically, that would do it. I mean, even with where we're at, I mean, $3.2 million, and that's just the county. That's not those demand transfers that come back to each one of the cities too, which includes Manhattan and the other 4 smaller communities. So there's even more impact coming into that. But for us, that puts us at that so-called revenue neutral rate. That does balance it out, and it gives us about $900,000. Even outside of that, we wouldn't have to talk about, do we keep $200,000 in or take $200,000 out? We can keep up with what we're doing and still do what we need to do. Something that we need our community, and we need the entities within our community to understand that. And that's another balance that can certainly be made in the process.
So the board knows the reason I do like putting that 200,000 back. I mean, John hasn't been here that long, but I've been here, as you said, stone, tablet and chisel. That's really what got us in the situation where we had to go for the original first half-cent sales taxes, because to keep taxes low, we were underfunding all departments, and public works was one of them. We were getting behind on roads and bridges. And so, I am sensitive to it. I do know it costs, there is a cost of doing business. Like I tell budget and finance people that we have, and they show with what departmental budgets are doing. And Catherine alluded to, the service that we provide, but I think what we always have to throw in there too is the level of service we provide. We could provide a lesser level of service and still do the same basic functions, but I think our community expects a high level of service and across the board in all departments, and that's what we do. Even our county roads, our county gravel roads are much better than a lot of other county gravel roads adjoining us, and so that's what's expected in Riley County. And so it costs more to do that. The exemptions, John was talking with me last week, and so I told him, I said, the big one to me is exemptions. We've got this, our state needs to wake up. I wish they do what Nebraska did a decade and a half ago, and that's do away with all exemptions and start over. Nebraska did that several years ago. They did away with all exemptions and started over, made people reapply.
Mhm.
I think that needs to happen. We had too many. We need more people paying a little piece of that pie.
Right.
I also think that with as much state, local, and federal owned property here, there needs to be an offset built into that. I'm not saying dollar for dollar, but something needs to be built in that to help make up the difference too, because we're providing services to those entities as well. And I don't want to say that's free at cost, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
We need the equivalent of that. I realize the amount that feds pay, it's that payment in lieu of taxes isn't much, but the state. That they're one of the major tax exempt things here. Like I say, they've got farms all over the county, and we're driving our roads to get to them, but
Expecting us to take care of them to get to them, which is an expectation that should be met. Don't get me wrong, but it's okay to take something for myself, but at the expense of everybody else. But when everybody else does it,
I think Commissioner
What do
McKenzie
you
makes a
have?
good point. Really the state of Kansas for entities such as ours and anyone that has state university, if the state would provide us some type of in lieu, like the federal government does, but on top of that, they not only don't do that is, the unfunded mandates that they require us to pay. And it was brought up earlier today, the LABTR don't know how it started. I'll tell you how it started. I was here, the state was short of money. So we'll just keep more money. That's why the state did it. We bailed them out of budget difficulties by them keeping all of that money. It's the same reason why the second half of taxes used to be collected, real estate taxes, June 20th. Why did they make that date May 10th, which I remember very well because May 10th is my birthday? It was because that year they were short on revenues, and the only way they knew they could get more revenues on the books was to move it before the end of the fiscal year and to have those monies collected. It's all shell games with the state. Now, part of the benefit of me being here since the stone tablets is knowing what they have done and seeing what they have done. And it's all for their benefit at the cost to local units of government and local taxpayers. They're the ones that, through revenue neutral say, oh, they're looking out for the taxpayers. They're not. They're keeping the money for them. They just want to put the blame on us. And you see why I don't testify at the legislature.
Do you have those stone tablets somewhere with that data on them?
I'm not as young as I used to be. I can't lift them anymore.
So you gonna retire here and run for state office?
No, I've been asked that multiple times in my career. No way. I would be a one-termer. Because you see what you get. And I'm not gonna vote to stay in office.
Well, and one of the things that had come up, I guess, in the last legislature was the flat tax. And the flat tax doesn't work unless you eliminate, like Nebraska did, eliminate all the exemptions and start over and make it a level playing field. And that
Yeah.
nobody gets that.
Yeah.
Another great
Even with
thing-
that flat tax,
It's
even in the
still
midst of
at
that,
level.
there was a list of new exceptions that were going to be incorporated along with it.
Yeah, so it's like, it doesn't make sense to
And
me.
I hate to give Nebraska too much credit because we have one employee that's from Nebraska here, but
Well, I've got
And
several.
I've got another good thing that they do is they only meet every 2 years. The problem with our state and others, I think, that do it annually, they don't see the immediate result that 1 year. So they change it again before you even see what that change made the previous year is really going to do over the long term.
Right,
I think that's a really good thing. The state legislature only meeting 2 years, and you can see the impact of laws over a little bit longer time and quit changing them every year.
plus they have a unicameral too, which, they've only got one body, which, makes it, I think, a little less.
But the other thing with that of going every second year, you take maybe the election year off. And some of the politically charged and ideological themes that come up along the way of that every other year,
Mhm.
it's also taken out of the equation, which
Mhm.
is part of that dynamic.
Mhm.
Right, a lot more problems. Seems to be the representatives of the Senate seem to be fighting over.
Oh, they're always fighting over there, and then have to go to conference, and then, it's just, it doesn't work there. So, I don't know, what would that take a constitutional amendment?
Sure.
Yeah,
Mm,
well, how they did it in Nebraska.
That one might be procedural, but
I don't know. No. We can debate that all day.
Commissioners, if you're in favor of what I presented before you, I'd need a separate motion for each of the indication of revenue neutral rate forms.
Go back to where we were at.
Raleigh County,
And if I remember right, you have to do them segregately, correct?
Correct.
there's Raleigh County, and then there's.
Fire district. I was anticipating the fire district was gonna have to do that after challenges we were faced with last year. Yeah, I don't see no way around it, so. Okay, well, I make a motion then to approve the indication of the revenue neutral rate for the 2024 Riley County budget.
I'll second.
So moved and seconded to approve the indication of the revenue neutral rate for Raleigh County for 2024. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Thank you, commissioners. We are in David Adams time.
Do I need to make a second one for the fire?
Yeah.
One more
Yeah, sorry.
resolution.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and also make a motion For indication of increase on the revenue neutral rate for the Riley County Rural Fire District number 1.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the indication of a revenue neutral rate for Raleigh County Rural Fire District number 1. All in favor? Aye.
Okay, I need the chair to sign before the players, please.
Oh, I just get to do this, huh?
Yep, yep. Hold you responsible as the chair.
Thanks a lot.
Now we actually got the other two on record as well. So it's okay.
I didn't know you signed it.
Yeah. You had to sign it. last.
Well, you can take a look at these.
No, it's-
Actually, all things considered, they're pretty simple.
Yeah. After all this, yeah. Getting to this point,
Had more challenging ones.
starting in March. Okay, David.
All right, good morning, Commissioners. David Adams, EMS Ambulance Director with my monthly updates. Starting off with our operations calls for service in June, we had 405, which is a pretty good decrease from what we've been seeing. It was, when looking at the numbers, it was just kind of across the board. There wasn't any one thing. We did a few less out of town transfers than we typically do. I know I certainly felt it. There was a day I came in and the crew going off shift said they ran 5 calls that day. Said I didn't know those days still existed. So another crew ran 8, you know, so it's kind of a good thing as well. You know, we're not needed quite as much last month. So we had 15 calls in North County. And then break it down by volume by stations, nothing changed out of that, you know, 147 at our headquarters, 111 here at 11th Points. Public Works had 93, the airport station had 54, and then we did 9 first responses in Leonardville. So the rest of calls, if applicable, are event standbys and supervisors writing reports. So I continue to work on building related topics. The building up north has slowed down. You know, we were making good progress. I was up there on Thursday and there was one person, I think he was plumbing or cooling was in there doing some work, but it has slowed down. But yeah, the doors are in, the garage doors are in, they've got the windows boarded up and such. So they're moving along. So we continue to prepare for opening of that station. I have a meeting this afternoon with some of my staff. I believe that we're going to need to come back for 1 or 2 more full-time positions to have that fully staffed. So I'll know more this afternoon, certainly 1, but maybe 2. So, and then that will be coming to you soon. So we've rolled out and started implementing that new report writing software. It's going fairly well. Had a few little hiccups, but that's kind of operationally inside our department we're working through, but they're moving along. The state was supposed to have to be done by December 31st, and they've moved it to September 1st. So that was nice of them. But still working with some protocols with Manhattan Fire and County Fire number 1. I believe we're pretty close. Mainly it's just questions that they have. So some of the thought processes and such, but the UTV that we loaned to Potawatomi County was returned, very clean, full of gas, all the equipment, working just fine. So they were very appreciative and they wanted me to make sure I tell you thank you for allowing them to use that for a few days. It helps them quite a bit, and they don't have any UTVs because they only need it once a year. So, but they were appreciative and they took good care of it. We did have a crew up in Randolph for the July 4th celebration. So, and they were busy. They saw multiple patients, people with mainly heat related. So, but they stayed busy while they were up there. So, today is begins the 2-day Battle of the Badges blood drive. So, we'll have a crew there as well today and tomorrow. So they're just on duty crews that are still available for call, all of that, but they'll be there as well. So. We did use we always use kind of this slow time throughout every year. June, July is our slowest months, if you will. And so we're doing some good vehicle maintenance and upkeep as they go through. So we have a truck right now. It's at Ford. It's got an oil leak inside the engine. The shops did everything they could, but sometimes they just can't get to some of these. So we do have a truck that's out of service. And so when that occurs, and it's been out for a week, that's why we have our spare empty trucks. We brought one online, took the equipment out of the one that went to Ford, put it in this new truck, had to get it licensed, the new truck licensed. I had to take the license off of the old truck. So that's all done through the state. So we've got that done. And so when that truck comes back, we'll reverse the process. So, try to stay in good graces with the state. Active violence training was last week, 10th, 11th, and 12th, went very well. So it's a lot of work. So kudos to our members of the three agencies and well, actually 4 with emergency management, roll fire. So we have a team that works on that year round and putting that together. A lot of training, it's a lot of work, but unfortunately, it's very necessary training. And it went well. As always, you learn things. And this year, we added a wrinkle for the command staff. So we did some training with the command staff on how we would handle just different scenarios towards the end of the incident and then going forward. So because just as soon as the incident ends, that's just the first phase. So so very good training there. And then next year we'll build off of that as well for all the different command staffs. So really happy with that. And then last, biannual rotation of our shift lieutenants. We move our shift lieutenants every 2 years to a different captain. It helps them have a better understanding of how different captains do their jobs. And so the lieutenants, if you work with the same person under the same person for 20 years, then that's all you know. And that was something that I saw when I was a shift lieutenant. I worked for 7 years under the same captain. And then when I became captain, there was still so much I didn't know. And I didn't know how, everybody kind of does things differently and have different personalities and such. And it works very, very well. So they're moving here, I believe, in next month. So it's a good thing to do. I really do think it does help them and to just be more well-rounded. Education, 100% review of all calls. Nothing's changed there. That Alex and the captains or the lieutenants, they handle that. It's 2 phases depending on the type of call and such that they run. So I told you about the active violence. That's falls in the education realm, and then some of the operations. All except for one of the orientees that we brought on a couple months ago are released and are filling time. And 4 of those will be going full-time with us for the new station as we open up. So that's where we needed 6 new full-time employees and so we've identified 4. And so they've gone through the orientation, they're starting to work. And so that's exactly how I envisioned it to work. So we're getting there. And then this year we do credentialing every other year. This year's credentialing for our staff for Manhattan Fire, for County Fire, of those who respond. And so Alex is updating that test and some of those and start to work on that schedule. So, and that'll take him through the end of the year, as along with everything else that he does is pushing that out. So. And then community outreach, RC check lanes, we still do that. And we've had multiple community demonstrations, Ogden schools, we went there for their day camps and such. And I know some other school districts and some of their day camps have reached out to us. And so we take a on-duty crew there and let them show the kids the trucks and our equipment, and they get to meet them and things like that. Kids really like it. It's beneficial for them, takes away some of their fear and anxiety if they have to interact with us in a more serious role. So, but I always encourage those, and it does well. Any questions about that? Okay, so our pick list, day of the week, so pretty steady throughout. Wednesday was a little lower. Typically, Wednesday is one of our busier days. But it was a little lower right now with last month. But we didn't see a huge increase in call volumes on Saturday, but we did see a little bit on Fridays. So it all just kind of bounces around. And then our breakdown of times. So you see, we were a little slower at night, in the middle of the night, midnight to 1 a.m. We were, and then up to about had a little jump at 2 o'clock, kind of when the bars close, is when we get a little spike, and then kind of tailored off throughout the evening, and then pick back up during the day. So, and then as I spoke of earlier, just a breakdown of our calls for our stations. You have any questions for me?
Sounds like you've been busy.
Yes, keeps me out of trouble that way.
Yeah,
So
I
Rich
guess so.
tells me. All right, thank you,
Okay,
Commissioners.
thank
Thanks,
you.
Dave, appreciate it. Time for press conference, Commissioners. First, Mr.
Morning, Commissioners. Evan McMillan, Public Works. I just wanted to give a reminder to the public that transfer station will be closed on Saturday, July 29th for some minor improvements. We expect to open back up that following Monday.
That's it?
Go ahead.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Yep. Great, thanks.
Morning.
Morning.
Fortunately, we've been getting some rain, and so the gardens keep growing, and maybe the weeds just as well. We're gonna have a discussion on gardening coming up on Wednesday, 6 p.m. We're gonna be at the Be Able Learning Center, so 431 South Fifth Street. And they have a nice raised bed there, a couple of them actually. And so if there's actual need to go outside and see how the temperature is. But we'll start the discussion inside, and if we need to go out and look at the garden, we can do that as well. So this time of year, we're kind of just trying to encourage people to continue gardening. We got a long season ahead of us still, and we are getting into the fall planting actually. And so we'll discuss what you can start to plant for a fall harvest as well. So again, this is this Wednesday, 6 p.m. at the Be Able 431 South 5th Street. Also, we have a county fair coming up, and the community is invited to bring any of their exhibits out for the open class. And so that will be on Thursday, July 27th from 10 to noon, as far as bringing vegetables, fruits, flowers, houseplants, those kind of things. Master gardeners will be there to take in the exhibits, and they'll be judged a little bit later in the afternoon. And you can come out and see what kind of ribbon you got. And they'll be released on Monday, the 31st at 5 p.m. During the fair, Master Gardeners will be out with an evening booth out along the walkway there. And so if you have a gardening question or just want to stop by and say hello, we will be out there from 5 until we get bored, 9:30, whenever people kind of wander away. So we'll have Master Gardeners there every night, Thursday through Monday. Monday may be a little sparse, but come out early and ask some gardening questions if you'd like. We'll be handing out fans, hand fan, you know, it's usually hot, so if you're overheated, we'll have a fan for you with some information. So encourage you, a couple of programs coming up here, one Wednesday and during the county fairs. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks, Commissioner. Yeah, Mr. Holmes.
I see it's time.
Good morning, Commissioners. Clancy Holman, Riley County Councilor. I'm gonna skip past the project list for just a second, and just tell you about a deadline that's coming up that's important to know about. KC has announced the dates it's going to have its Legislative Policy Committee meetings for next year's platform that KAC will lobby on behalf of member counties during the 2024 legislative session. For that reason, it's important you know what those deadlines are. You have to, what we have to do is we do every year, submit anything that we want added to the platform. And that goes into my next statement, which is I agree with what the board is. I think several of I think all three of you probably at one time or another suggested. I think we need to pare down the ask that we make next year to maybe 2 items. This would be my suggestion. One would be the restart of LABTR, because as you've seen from the materials from KAC, they're prepared to get geared up about this for next year. And it makes sense to try and sign on to that because it's important to all counties that the state return to some form of that. Among the interesting ideas for a restart is to get some counties together, not 104 other counties, but a small group of counties with large enough common interest in this. And I think the 4 or 5 largest counties in the state, at the suggestion of our lobbyists, probably ought to get together and start talking about this, about a common approach during next year's legislative session. But that would be for the restart of LABTR. And I would suggest also, based on this most recent legislative session, Senate Bill 162 on the nuisance abatement authority in the unincorporated area. That's again modeled after Sedgwick County's legislation, which was called Senate Bill 52. I think that sticks in my mind. Their authority into that sunsets in next 1 year from this July. So if Sedgwick County wants to maintain that, have that in place, leave it in place, they're going to need to go back to the legislature, presumably, assuming that their board doesn't decide they're not interested. They need to go back in and be ready to argue to the legislature, extend it for Sedgwick County. Your bill, Senate Bill 162, is virtually identical to that bill. That was probably one reason it was reasonably well received, at least at the committee level in the Senate. And good questions were asked. You can't always take a great deal of comfort in those things because it's still got to get out of committee and it still has to pass both chambers. But it's a good sign. You might as well accept good news when you get it, particularly in the legislature. And if you're on the side of a county for something, so that's my one editorial comment. Okay, maybe not the only, it's a primary one. So I think we need to go back in, and likewise with that, we need to make sure we go forward with some other counties. Again, not 104, but some with a common interest. And we got support during the last legislative session from a couple of counties. Direct from one and another county that showed up. I think they maybe didn't have time to put something together. But to kind of go up and make a presentation to show that committee why those issues that we're facing in the unincorporated area, because of the lack of authority counties have to address nuisance properties. And that's all we're talking about, nuisance properties. That we need to have some legislation, much like Sedgwick County, and why that makes sense. So I do need to bring back to you draft legislative request forms that we will submit to KAC, but I want to sound you out. Are you okay with zeroing in on those 2 items and presenting those in the form of legislative request forms? I've got to turn them in. I've got some significant time. I've got till August 11th is the deadline for submitting those. Let me just double check. Yeah, Friday, August 11th, close of business to turn them in. Got plenty of time. I'll bring them back this week or next for you to look at. And again, those are just the legislative request forms that go to KAC and their policy committee for their discussion and whether or not they will support them. And there's no reason to believe they won't. First of all, are you okay with that approach for next year's legislative platform? Does that make sense?
I do have one question. Where are we on county home rule? Is that out of the question or what?
It's not a matter of being out of the question. It's been a priority at KC for many years.
Mhm.
And we can keep saying it, we can keep showing up to present arguments in favor of it, but it's gone nowhere so far.
It's a tougher process than some of the other things that we can probably take care of early, because you're gonna have to get 2/3 in both the House and the Senate, and it's gonna have to require a constitutional amendment. And that educational side there is gonna be
Yeah,
the bigger of probably the challenges, to be honest with you. So
well, the educational aspect of both of these is gonna take some work. I think.
Sure, absolutely. But quite frankly, in my opinion, the home rule is, I mean, that's stalled in the legislature.
Yeah.
That's not going
And
anywhere.
they're not even talking- The others two at least seem to have.
They have some
Possibility.
tracks. I mean, it's fair to say that there's not this huge amount of opposition so far. Again, they're only I mean, quite frankly, it'll be interesting to see what the legislature does on LABTR. The appealing part of their restart of LABTR is they're up for election next year. And this is one way that both sides, I mean, if we craft the argument right, and if we approach it right, it can be a win for them, for the state, a political win for them, because they get to say they restarted it. And they restarted LABTR on some level, and that these funds can and should go to property tax. Probably what's going to need to be necessary in some initial discussions about this is some kind of commitment that the counties involved are going to direct that money, any money received, to the reduction of property tax, which seems a fair trade, provided, in my opinion, this is just me, provided that that isn't defeated by additional unfunded mandates on top of the restart of LABTR that wipe out the benefit that otherwise would be realized by directing those newly received funds over to reducing property tax. I mean, and it's going to be interesting to see what can be crafted by figuring out a way to present something to the legislature that they see the benefit of doing it, not just because it will help counties, but it helps them politically address what they've been talking about big time, not just in recent years, but particularly in this most recent legislative session about property tax relief. It's a way to do it, but it's got to be real. It's got to be a real ability of counties to not simply have additional costs tacked on or new unfunded mandates or increased unfunded mandates for existing programs that we already provide services on. There's got to be some give and take on that, I think, in order to have it make sense for counties. But there's some potential common ground here.
But as I thought, the LABTR got through the representative, got through the House last year.
I don't know where it stalled because the
conference committee.
I thought it got through the House, but the Senate was the ones that put the brakes on. Is there a way to find out who's putting the brakes on it so we can lean on certain?
Well,
It's leadership.
Well,
That's
those,
what it is.
some, and I don't know what counties they're from, can those counties
Yes.
lean on them?
Yeah.
well, I think there's a way. I think there's a way. It's not a matter of really,
It seemed like a almost more focused attack.
well, it needs to
Might
be,
help.
and it needs to be, again, a win on the political side for leadership. And I think that there's ways to craft it so that, because if leadership's on board, then you're 90% of the way there.
They're making some, their proposals for limiting appraisals was not saving taxes. That was, some of their ideas weren't good. This one to me makes sense. This is actual, this is actually going to help property taxes for cities
Yeah.
and counties.
So and again, based on the amount that counties and cities have lost ever since they stopped doing it, it shows you how powerful this could be over time. And again, it's just going to be that it's got to be both. There's got to be some help on both sides,
And
some cooperation.
do you know if the cities, what is it, League of Kansas Municipalities, is this something they're looking at too?
Presumably, yes. Now, I don't know that for a fact, but they're the ones that updated all those numbers. So that was an update which was really needed to show the current figures on the loss over the years. And that was great that came out. And KEC is encouraging member counties to help begin, just even with some communication with local media about educating people about, here's the impact. Here's the amount that this particular county would have received in this amount of time. So it'll be interesting. But it can be, there's some real hope, I think, that we can move forward on both those issues and maybe get somewhere in the next legislative session. It's just going to depend on what kind of support we get from other counties and whether we're able to work together. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to, but it's always a scramble to get other entities involved. And if we're willing to put in that kind of effort, then I kind of like our chances.
But it also seems like KC do the same thing, kind of focus. They had a long list of stuff on theirs, and they need.
They've got a lot of issues because they've got 105 counties, but they've done a better job, I think, over the years in paring down, making more general statements to give them more flexibility on those issues. But
More
yes,
focused,
it's a
But
long.
also, I mean, the other thing they're doing is. It comes up as defending us from what, like you say, the unfunded mandates that they have to keep an eye on that too.
Sure. In some counties, I mean, you're gonna have contrary interests. They're gonna be, and so they always have to balance that out too. Richard.
Whenever the board's done.
I was just gonna say they have to balance out that with some larger special interests that are up in Topeka sometimes too, and whether you can get those things done or not as well.
You know, the state's big hesitancy on the LADTR reinstituted is that we're just gonna increase our budgets by that amount of BTR, but I think, you know, part of your education is the education about reinstituting it, but I think there's a way, this is one way I think the state really could say it's truly ad valorem tax if they make changes and provisions or a separate law and say, okay, county, we're willing to give you the LABTR if you don't exceed your prior year's mill levy. And so don't exceed that. And then we will allow you to reduce your ad valorem tax by the amount of LABTR monies we give you. And that would be a way to hold the counties as being responsible and not increasing the budget by the LABTR. So I think, you know, counties and cities may not ultimately like it, but still it's better than what we're getting right now. And it truly would be ad valorem tax reduction. So I think if we look at it from their standpoint as well on why they don't really trust us to use it appropriately, I think you could establish some laws and provisions that are much more useful than what we're doing right now, because what we're doing right now does not, you basically see everyone is exceeding the revenue neutral rate and keeping their mill levy about the same, a little less, a little more, you know. So if you just froze it at that prior year's mill levy rate,
Reduce it by what?
there's
And the
gonna
law
be give
need-
and take on both
The
sides.
statute needs to be updated anyway, because it's not reflective of some new age. Revenues that come online and some that are no longer part of that equation. I mean, it's 60, almost 60 years old, 64. I think the legislature developed that statute and it went into effect in 65. So, I mean, you know, moving down the road, you know, gas taxes change. I mean, there's 5 different taxes that were accelerated in that to basically form that pot of dollars coming back. And, you know, both the state and the local entities use those. So that makes sense to do that. But Windows, whereas is internet sales tax fall into that equation. Some point in time, we're going to talk about EV, and I guarantee there's going to be some type of tax in there.
Yeah,
So that's got to be incorporated into that process at some point in time too. But you know, I tend to agree with Rich. Yeah, it's got to balance out, and it has to be for property tax reduction for it to be an overall win, both for the local entities and for the state. It has to be.
and for the taxpayers.
Correct. In the end, yes.
I'll bring those back to you for the legislative request forms on those 2 items with a view towards that's what will probably be the board's overall platform. It's not to say you couldn't do it. have additional items between now and the start of the next session. But at least for now, that'll be what I'll assume you're going to focus. And obviously, I gotta believe this will be like other sessions, because I can't imagine next session, there won't be things that we have to react to as maybe not the best idea for counties and their citizens. So still have that reactive element will still be. That's all I have unless you have questions. And if you have questions on the project list, I can address those.
And so you Clancy, I think if we could educate in the right manner on that, what I'm talking about. That would do way more for what they wanted to accomplish and what we wanted to accomplish in a long time. Because everything they've done, including the tax, they've done nothing.
Well, and you,
Revenue neutral rate is just,
Which is.
no, I get it though. I mean, I really get why they did it, just overall,
yeah,
but, once again, their ends to the means the means doesn't meet the ends.
Yeah.
I mean, I get that they
I
want to,
don't understand, the revenue neutral rates, we did nothing.
No.
Except cost counties and
Yeah.
taxpayers more money. It served no purpose. We already had public budget sessions that were published. And the work sessions, it accomplished nothing but spend more ad valorem taxes.
Now, that's why I think that a solution that does result in political value for the legislature, because that's the only thing that's going to get something like this to have traction, but also, as has been said in a number of different ways by different members today, is there's got to be give and take. You got to have the assurance that it's real, available property tax relief. And that can't happen if you're going to get a distribution that then you get additional unfunded mandates you still have to pay for. That isn't going to work. That isn't going to meet the needs of counties. It just won't. So, that's my 2 cents. Thank you. That's all I got.
like that's the end of our formal meeting. Anything else that we discussed today? Yeah, really.
no, I've got some other things in law board meeting downtown.
Yeah, that's true.
Like I say, we've had a long time before we've had a long time
Short
since we've had
meeting, yeah.
a short meeting and figure the board would mind.
Okay, well, I guess with that said, I'll go and make a motion to adjourn the July 17th meeting of the Riley County Commission.
Second.
So moved and seconded to adjourn the July 17th meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.
Here's for all your work on the budget, appreciate it.
Then I give you